There is evidence that at least some, and possibly all, people have previously existed in another body and lived another existence. When anomalous memories appear as personal recollections, those who experience them tend to believe that they stem from their own previous life. However, the memories that surface in consciousness are not likely to be past life recollections. Instead, they appear to be experiences of the reincarnation type. The latter are widespread as well. Stories suggestive of reincarnation are not limited, whether geographically or culturally. They occur in all corners of the planet and among people of all cultures. It is considered by some to be the greatest unknown scientific discovery of modern times. In the last chapter of Dr. Ian Stevenson's book entitled 20 Cases Suggestive of Reincarnation from 1967, he provides exhaustive scientific reasoning which concludes that reincarnation is the only viable explanation that fits the facts of his study.
Particularly interested in a collection we have about 15 cases where there are two birthmarks corresponding to bullet wounds of entry and exit. And forensic pathologists know that nearly always if you shoot somebody, the bullet wound of entry is small and round, and the bullet wound of exit is large and irregular in shape. And that's the way our birthmarks, in about half of these cases, they correspond exactly that way.
Dr. Stevenson claims to have found over 3,000 examples of reincarnation during his time, which he shared with the scientific community. During more than 4 decades, Stevenson investigated the reincarnation-type experiences of thousands of children, both in the West and in the East. Some of the past life memories recounted by the children have been verified as the experience of a person who had lived previously, and whose death matched the impressions reported by the child. Sometimes the child carried a birthmark associated with the death of the person with whom he or she identified, such as an indentation or discoloration on the part of the body where a fatal bullet entered, or a malformation on a hand or the foot the deceased had lost. He wrote in his study, "About 35% of children who claim to remember previous lives have birthmarks or birth defects that they attribute to wounds on a person whose life the child remembers. The cases of 210 such children have been investigated." Buddhist teachings, for example, tell us that the soul or spirit does not always reincarnate on the earthly plane and in a human form. It may not reincarnate at all, evolving to a spiritual domain from where it either does not return or returns only to fulfill a task it was to accomplish in its preceding incarnation. Reincarnation is karma. Reincarnation and karma together explains divine justice and why some people are born into favorable conditions or are born into unfavorable conditions. Personality traits are also carried over from past lives. Edgar Cayce. Whatever we think, that thought makes an impression on the universal consciousness. Nothing is lost or done in secret. Everything is done within the universal consciousness, and the whole is affected by it, as well as all others within the whole. Reactions to past thoughts and actions become our destiny and karma. Our destiny is simply the rebounding effects of previous choices remembered by the soul. A man acts according to the desires to which he clings. After death, he goes to the next world, bearing in his mind the subtle impressions of his deeds. He returns again to this world of action. Thus, he who has desire continues subject to rebirth. He who lacks discrimination, whose mind is unsteady, and whose heart is impure, never reaches the goal, but is born again and again. But he who has discrimination, whose mind is steady, and whose heart is pure, reaches the goal, and, having reached it, is born no more. Upanishads. Rabbi Isaac Luria explains that the soul is comprised of 613 channels, which parallel the 248 limbs and 365 blood vessels of the human body. These 613 channels attain eternal elevation when the soul fulfills all 613 commandments during its earthly descent. Usually, a soul does not manage to fulfill all the commandments in one go, and must be repeatedly reincarnated until it has fulfilled them all. There are some souls who do not descend for their own growth or perfection. Rather, the only reason they return to this earth is to benefit others. This can be to help out an individual or the entire generation, spiritually or materially. Alexander Cannon, British psychiatrist, wrote in his book, The Power Within, that the evidence on this score is too strong to be dismissed. For years, the theory of reincarnation was a nightmare to me, and I did my best to disprove it, and even argued with my trance subjects to the effect that they were talking nonsense. Yet, as the years went by, one subject after another told me the same story, in spite of different and varied conscious beliefs. Now, well over 1,000 cases have been so investigated, and I have to admit that there is such a thing as reincarnation. The proof and stories of reincarnation. 1. The story of Barbro Karlen. Barbro Karlen was born in Sweden in 1954 into a Christian family, claiming she was Anne Frank in her previous life. As a child, she was aware that she had lived another life as Anne Frank and had vivid dreams and a fear of uniforms, but it was not until she started school that she realized Anne Frank was famous and decided it was best not to go around claiming she was Anne Frank in her previous life. When she was a child, her parents went on a holiday to Europe and visited Holland and Anne Frank's house. When they arrived, Barbro knew the streets and was able to direct her parents to the house. On arriving, she noticed the steps, and once inside she felt terrified. When she entered her old bedroom, she noticed that newspaper clippings of movie stars, which she had placed on the walls when Frank was still there, but when she was about to describe them to her mother, they were properly vanished. When her mother made inquiries about the missing pictures, the guard told her they have been temporarily removed because the tourists were stealing them as souvenirs. 2. The story of James Leininger. James was a young boy from Louisiana who told his parents that, in a previous life, he was a pilot in World War II. As a young child, he had a fascination and strange familiarity with fighter planes from that period. By only 2 years of age, he had a knowledge of parts of planes that no child at his age could possibly know. He had regular nightmares of being trapped inside a burning plane, and was able to draw vivid pictures of planes and warships and overall battle scenes. He claimed that he was shot down by the Japanese, and the plane he flew was a Corsair. When they checked the records, they proved to be factual. It appears in his previous life he was a fighter pilot in World War II called James Houston, who was shot down in a Corsair. 3. The story of Jennifer and Gillian Pollock. Joanna and Jacqueline Pollock were two sisters who were born in Northumberland, the UK, who in 1957, while walking to the church, were struck and killed by a car. Over a year later, in October 1958, the mother gave birth to twins, who they called Jennifer and Gillian. The parents noticed that the girls shared the same birthmarks and the same scars as their sisters, and when the parents brought out the box belonging to the previous sisters, they knew the names of the dolls. The girls also shared the fear of cars. They had nightmares, screaming that the car was coming towards them. 4. The story of Chase Bowman. A young boy who claims he was a black Union soldier. Chase Bowman was a young boy who had a fear of loud noises and had always suffered from eczema on his wrists. He would always describe to his mother his experiences in a battle which appeared to be the American Civil War, where, as a black soldier, he was shot in the wrist. He was patched up in the infirmary and then sent back out to battle, of which he did not wish to return, as all he wanted to do was go back to his wife and child. On his return to battle, He said that he was ordered to stand behind a cannon, or the sword he had afterwards. Cayce was able to draw the battle scene from an arrow perspective, as if he were that dead soldier looking down in spirit. As Cayce Bowman, his mother was unable to find a reason for his eczema, yet once he was able to discuss the trauma of his life as a soldier, his mark cleared. 5. The story of Jenny Cockle. Jenny was born in Northampton, UK, and as a child, she always had dreams of living in the 1930s as a young woman living in Ireland and being a loving mother to many children. She was always drawing pictures of the place she has always wanted to live. Later in life, she underwent hypnosis and was regressed to prove that she had actually lived in the 1930s and found that her name was Mary Sutton. Apparently, Mary had a violent husband who would beat her regularly. She died at a very young age. Jenny, later on, found Mary's family, and they spoke about their memories to find out that Jenny was actually their mother back in the 1930s. 6. Mandy Seabrook. Mandy Seabrook claimed that she was Mandy Clark. Mandy, when she was 2.5 years old, asked some questions that appeared that she was talking about her mother's dead sister called Mandy Clark, who died as a child. Mandy Seabrook told her mom that she had appeared at the funeral as a spirit and observed all of the mourners. On the day of the funeral, it was raining, and Mandy was able to recall all of it. She even mentioned that her mom slipped and nearly fell in. Some researchers, such as Professor Ian Stevenson, have explored the issue of reincarnation and published evidence of children's memories of earlier lives. A minority of skeptics are critical of this work and say that more reincarnation research is needed. American mystic Edgar Cayce promoted the theory of both reincarnation and karma, but wherein they acted as instruments of a loving God as well as natural laws, the purpose being to teach us certain spiritual lessons. Animals are said to have undifferentiated group souls rather than individuality and consciousness. Once the soul evolves through a succession of animal incarnations and achieves human status, it is not then reborn in animal form. This research can be persuasive, and the concept of reincarnation looks bright. With all of this credible research and proof, the return to life is pretty much a proven fact.